Venom becomes Spider-Man, and it's the talk of the town, and it's really, really amazing. So, what this does is this initially opens up with Trask, Dr. Octopus, and Luke Cage, basically talking about the reformed S.C.A.R organization, the Symbiote Containment and Rendition Program. So a little bit of preface here, because it's been a while since we covered Venom. We haven't really covered it since the end of the Venom War storyline, and I think the first issue of All New Venom. Most all of you guys are aware that for like the first 10 issues or so, and even now to a degree, Marvel was toying with the general question, who is All New Venom? And we all pretty much learned that it's Mary Jane Watson. So that was kind of a cool development. The other really cool development that Marvel did was basically getting rid of Paul, right? Him and Mary Jane Watson breaking up. Thank God for that. But one of the other elements that Marvel had thrown in, that Al Ewing was doing as the writer of the comic, was the Symbiote Containment and Rendition Program. The idea was that it was initially led by a woman named Jillian Carson, operating under the name of Ripcord. The second person to do that, Stacy X, was actually the first. The whole idea behind it was that they were quite literally taking symbiotes with the intention of just turning them into a fuel source, or by some means destroying them. As far as I remember, I don't think we really got a full motivation for why Jill Carson hated symbiotes so much, but by and large it just seemed to be the credible threat that symbiotes had historically represented, going all the way back to like Venom's first appearance, the eventual arrival of Carnage, the various conflicts like King and Black, that symbiotes have kind of been historically shown as just like a credible threat to the city of New York. Now the idea was that by issue number 9 of All New Venom, basically there was a breakout that was actually led by Flash Thompson, who, for reasons that we don't have to go into here, was working alongside S.C.A.R and then basically turned against them, only to find out that Dr. Octopus was working with the organization as well. And so essentially Dr. Octopus had parlayed the defeat of Jillian Carson as the operations director of S.C.A.R into something that worked for him. And so with Trask being a senator and overseeing the creation of the program, he's now appointed Dr. Octopus as the head of the organization. There's a few other details that were going on behind the scenes, and we'll kind of talk about those as we go through the rest of the video, but that's kind of how you get to this point. Now again, Luke Cage is also mayor, and he has been for quite some time. But that's why the conversation here kind of kicks off with Trask simply saying, I'm not sure what's so difficult about all of this, Luke. As the new presidential advisor on symbiote affairs, I am in charge of the Symbiote Containment and Rendition Program, and after Ripcord fumbled the symbiote breakout on North Brother Island, Otto Octavius is my new pick for operations director. And of course, Dr. Octopus tries to greet Luke Cage, I wouldn't say so much as a friend, really more with the attitude of, oh, I'm 100% a villain, but I'm a villain in a position that you cannot oust me from. So good luck. Right, kind of taunting him to a degree. One of the other cool things that Dr. Octopus did, and this was actually revealed in issue number 9, is that his tentacles no longer operate based on his will alone. They're almost a kind of like hive mind to a degree. He calls them octoids, but that's why when Luke Cage tells him, right, get those tentacles out of my face or I'm going to start tearing them off, that Octopus is just like, actually, they just pop off these days. Each tentacle is a semi-autonomous drone colony, but don't let me confuse you with the science, because they kind of operate of their own accord to a degree. But Luke Cage talks to Trask and is just like, Dr. Octopus is a psychopath, right? He's tried to blow up this city more than once, and he's personally threatened my family and my daughter. But the response of Trask is Otto's been pardoned for any crimes he may have committed in the past. These days, he's a loyal servant of the government, and I'd have thought you'd approve of an ex-criminal turning his life around given your own history, which of course pisses off Luke Cage. But if you're familiar with Marvel Comics, specifically going back to the 1980s, one of the things that you're immediately seeing here, I know I did, is the Commission on Superhuman Activities, right? That if you really kind of want to look at it that way, and we're doing like one-to-one comparisons, that Trask is kind of playing the role of Valerie Cooper. It's a much smaller and more contained role, but she was an advisor, right? And she was arguably the most powerful woman in the government at the time that the Commission on Superhuman Activities was operating. Almost like the J. Edgar Hoover of the superhero community at that point in time, managing it, controlling it, deciding who gets to do what. It was Valerie Cooper who fired Steve Rogers as Captain America, replaced him with U.S. Agent John Walker. You're seeing the parallels here. Now, at the end of the day, S.C.A.R is just another anti-symbiote organization in Marvel. There's been like a million of them, right? So that isn't really new, but it is cool to see that Dr. Octopus is leading it. And so they just kind of leave Luke Cage with this almost idle threat under the radar, because when Luke Cage throws them out, that Otto just simply says, well, if Mr. Cage isn't willing to treat the symbiote menace with the seriousness that it deserves, well, mayors can outstay their welcomes too, can't they? And he says, there is an election coming up after all. Maybe we'll get a warmer welcome from his successor. And that's kind of the funny thing here, because when that happens, Luke Cage calls up basically the Daily Bugle and is like, I want to talk to Joe Robertson. Like, I need to talk to him right now. Now, there is a reason for that, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, but that's when you switch over to MJ, right, where she's just kind of doing a commercial because, celebrity life and all that kind of stuff. In the midst of all of this, the symbiote tells her there are sirens that are coming by. So, of course, she pops into the Venom suit, and they take off to basically investigate. Now, one of the cool things about all new Venom, and it did take it a little while to kind of gain its footing in Marvel, is that now that we're off to the races, it's a really solid comic. Like, it's a really, really fun comic. So we can cover the rest of it if you guys are interested, because there are some pretty dope moments, right? Toxin, Anti-Venom, Sleeper, right? These are some dope symbiotes that have been around for a while and are just kind of being restructured in various ways, some of which we'll end up spoiling in this particular video. But the point is, right, as they're basically leaving, you have MJ talking directly with the symbiote, right? She says, if we're still illegal alien number 1 in this city, not to mention Madame Mask knowing that it's me in here, is there a way that we can navigate without getting spotted? And so that's where Venom's just like, I have an idea about that. And he just says, like, it's not my idea. It was one of Dylan's back when I was bonded to him. But if the cops have their eyes peeled for Venom, then maybe they won't notice the Iron Venom. He turns an Iron Man, right? And MJ's just kind of like, you've got to be kidding me, right? Like, we can't fly. Remember, like, won't people smell a rat when Iron Man swings in on a web line? And that's where Venom's just like, actually, Dylan looked into Iron Man's history, and we came up with a solution for that problem. Who needs webs when you've got wheels? Because he fashioned skates. And this is true. This is actually true. There have been times back in the day in Marvel when Iron Man would use skates. I guess the most pertinent example, contextually, given everything that's happening in the Marvel Cinematic Universe right now, was in Secret Wars 3, right? But like, he's had skis on his feet. He's had all kinds of method of travel outside of flight, which really begs the question, why doesn't Marvel bring that stuff back? Seeing Iron Man just glide through the city sounds amazing. It sounds so amazing. But the funny thing about this, and it's one of the best things about how Al Ewing writes comics, a lot of stuff is very tongue-in-cheek. And so that's why MJ's just kind of like, this is ridiculous, right? And Venom's just like, you're not having fun, right? Symbiotes don't know how to roller skate, remember? And I couldn't do this without you. So you're kind of part of the reason why this is happening. Roll with it, right? And so like, they ride by some cops, and Venom's just like, howdy, right? Iron Man here, billionaire philanthropist and human being. And he just starts waving at the cops, and MJ's like, don't wave at them, right? And Venom's just like, admit you're having fun and I will stop. And MJ's just like, okay, right? This is a little fun. And how could it not be? Roller skating through the city of New York as a symbiote, like, it sounds like the most fun ever, right? And she just says, like, you realize Tony's going to lose it when he hears about this, right? And Venom's just kind of like, Tony Stark, right? You should call him. Like, weren't you guys friends? And of course, MJ responds, right? It was purely professional, and it was a long time ago, which is not true at all. But hey, MJ, keep telling yourself that. Tap your heels 3 times while you're doing it, and maybe it will be true. But she just says, like, I don't think that he could help with our situation. And Venom's just kind of like, I mean, it's just a social thing then, right? Like, he's a good-looking guy. And MJ's just kind of like, I mean, I am not going to date Tony Stark. You're not going to date Tony Stark. I absolutely forbid it. The man puts roller skates on battle armor, for Christ's sake. And that's when they finally catch up to what's going on. It's Blue Streak, who is clearly, by no standard of measurement, a complete ripoff of Dan Barrett, who debuted in DC Comics in 1939 with Mystery Men #1, created by Charlton Comics before DC bought them, or even Ted Kord, who appeared in Captain Atom #8, I think it was, back in 1966. By no standard of measurement is he a clear ripoff of any of these characters who have adopted the moniker of Blue Beetle within DC. The cool thing about Blue Streak is that, like, he runs a social media platform. So one of the best things about his character now is, like, whenever he's committing crimes, he's talking to his fans while he does it, right? So he's like, this is Blue Streak, right? Testing out my new golf ball cannon on the streets of New York. Like and subscribe. If Logan Paul were a villain, this would be him. And literally Venom's just kind of like, so this is Slide all over again. Like, why are all the bad guys on social media now? And MJ's just like, I mean, because they always were. So in the midst of all of this, Blue Streak turns around, starts firing off shots, right? He's like, golf balls versus Iron Man armor at 10,000 frames per second. This one's absolutely going on the thumbnail. And MJ's just like, duck. Right? And Venom doesn't really see the threat here. He's just kind of like, well, it's a golf ball, right? How hard can it possibly hit? And that's where MJ's like, it's not the golf balls, you dimwit. It's the cannon they're being fired out of. With that much force, anything becomes a bullet. Anything and everything can become a projectile. There's a reason why pieces of straw will puncture a wooden telephone pole in the midst of a tornado. There's just that much force behind it. So in the middle of all of this, one of the cops, right, like he's watching the Hindenburg crash, is just like, oh, the humanity. Tony Stark's head just exploded. And so the cops are just like, we need backup from S.C.A.R, because clearly these guys figure out it's obviously a symbiote, because how in the world is Iron Man continuing to roller skate down the street without a head? And so at that point, you jump over to Luke Cage and Robbie Robertson. And the funny thing about this is that in the conversation that they have, they talk about the idea of S.C.A.R, right? Luke Cage basically saying that the S.C.A.R organization is now being ran by Dr. Octopus, that it's a villain running an organization tasked with tracking down symbiotes, that it really isn't that dissimilar from like when Norman Osborn became director of Hammer after taking over S.H.I.E.L.D., right? They're like, it's a villain who is going to use the power of the government to do villainous things. And so the question Luke Cage has is like, what are we going to do about it, right? And Robbie's just kind of like, I mean, what's this we, right? Like, despite all these long lunches, I'm a newspaper man, not a politician. And one of the cool things here is that Luke Cage responds. He says, sure, right, the Daily Bugle might be the only newspaper in the city that does not let the rich and powerful call the shots, that you call them all on your own, right? You print what you think needs printing. You don't print what you don't think needs printing. And I notice what you do not print. Those Who is Venom meetings that we used to have, we haven't had one in a while, have we? Why is that? Who is Venom, Robbie? And Robbie Robertson has actually known for quite some time. He knows it's Mary Jane Watson, right? He learned that a while ago. I want to say that it was issue number 6, but I could be wrong on that. But Robbie just says, right? I mean, let's assume that I do know. As I just said, Luke, I'm a newspaper man, a journalist, and a journalist protects their source, always. So the question, Luke, is who are you right now? The mayor seeking re-election or the hero of the downtrodden? And Luke Cage responds in a pretty solid answer. He's like, I mean, that's the thing, right? They're exactly the same. If you're not working for the downtrodden, I don't believe that you can get elected, not this year and not in this city. But it's still hard for me to think of a parasitic alien as the downtrodden, Robbie. All I know is what I read in the papers. Those eyewitness accounts of the Kree spaceship crash last week, which actually happened in Venom number 250. That was part of the story where there were like gnolls coming back, and then it turned out to be one of the most reviled Venom stories in recent memory. But he continues on. He says, Venom and Madame Mask were brawling in the street, and the cops were on their way. An exploding UFO gave them both their chance to escape. So, Madame Mask ran, and Venom stayed to help. He helped. Now again, Luke Cage doesn't know that it's MJ. However, it is important to point out, Madame Mask knows who Mary Jane Watson is as Venom. It's probably just Al Ewing building up Madame Mask as like the arch nemesis for MJ as Venom, which is actually a great idea. Like, that's a really, really good idea. But still, right, Luke Cage just says, like, maybe I was wrong about Venom or his new host, and I'd like to talk to him, right? And that's where Robbie's just kind of like him, as in Venom. Is that why you wanted to get lunch? Because I don't know how to get in contact. And that's where Luke is just kind of like, that's the thing, Robbie, I think you do. Because Venom is Rick Jones, isn't he? And Robbie's just kind of like he won't say, right? Won't confirm or deny. The issue is that in the middle of this, Blue Streak comes racing by on his roller skates. Venom comes by with no head on, both of whom are being chased by cops. And so Luke and Robbie are just like, we should probably continue this later. You need to go deal with that, right? And Luke's like, yeah, I need to go deal with that kind of thing. Which is just an amazing moment. I love the way that Al Ewing is right on Venom right now. I really feel like I've been missing out, to be honest with you guys. Like, it's really solid. But again, like MJ and Venom, right? The two of them talking, where Mary Jane says we're too slow, right? We're never going to catch up with Blue Streak in a foot race. We need to go somewhere that he's going to be, which means taking the high ground. And so Venom's just kind of like, I get you, right? Like, time to sling our hook, Iron Man style. So like they fire a fake grappling hook, attach it to a roof, and just take off. And so Venom's just kind of like, you know, we've been running around without a head. People are going to find it suspicious. We could be remote controlled armor, right? And MJ's just like, too much goose splatter, right? They would never buy it. But let's get a lead on where Blue Streak's headed from up here, and then we can go after him. The problem is that once they're on the roof, S.C.A.R starts going after him, right? S.C.A.R's there on the spot. And S.C.A.R has a whole new arsenal that they didn't previously have before. Because one of the things that we learned in All New Venom issue number 9 is that despite the charter, the mandate that S.C.A.R had, right, to basically capture symbiotes, figure out some way to repurpose them while simultaneously removing them as a threat, they were essentially a skeleton crew. So much so that like when the actual breakout happened, there were only 4 agents guarding the prison where the symbiotes were being held. They just didn't have enough manpower. But now, they do, because Dr. Octopus is nothing if not a complete genius, and he knows exactly how to attack symbiotes from virtually any direction because he's so used to dealing with Spider-Man. And lest we forget, right, while the symbiote mannerisms and their personalities have shifted a lot over the decades in Marvel, specifically Venom itself, at the end of the day, they are all modeled after Spider-Man. And so to be able to overcome Spider-Man is not that dissimilar to being able to overcome Venom. It's simply just reworking what abilities you use because the symbiotes don't necessarily have the same weaknesses as Peter Parker. But again, in the midst of all of this, Venom's just like, okay, like whatever that is, they did not have one on North Brother Island. And MJ's just kind of like probably why they've got one now, right? Like I have to say though, I really don't like the sound of full symbiote scan or that bit about dolts, right? And in fact, one of the guys here is just like, please don't call us names, Ock, right? Like one of the agents. And Dr. Octopus is just like, I call it as I see it, slice. But again, like it's one of these funny things where Dr. Octopus is just kind of a little comedic here, but also presents a credible threat. Because at that point, you switch back over to Blue Streak, right, who literally comes barreling around the corner, and he's just like, Iron Man didn't stand a chance against basic backyard science, folks, but it's not all good news. Only 15% of you are subscribers. So why not hit that button today, which is exactly what you should be doing right now if you're watching this video. Shameless. For real though, hit the subscribe button. But he says there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that go into the Blue Streak channel. And once he turns this corner, he's met by Toxin, right? Who just says, like, I'm seeing the sweat. Now let's see the blood. Now here's one of the cool things, and a bit of a spoiler for what's happened over the Venom comics so far. Rick Jones is now Toxin in the Venom comics, which is dope because Rick Jones, let me tell you, man, this dude gets around. I mean, this guy gets around. Like Rick Jones, dude, this guy whores himself out to everybody, right? He's been one half of Captain Marvel. He's trained alongside Captain America and was even his sidekick for a period of time. He's the best friend of the Incredible Hulk. He's been a gamma irradiated Hulk. He's been everything, right? Rick Jones, it's really dope. Like it's one of the coolest legacies in Marvel. If it is a superhero role that can be played, there is a better than 0% chance that Rick Jones has in some capacity played that role. But again, we're talking is just like, now let's see the blood. Rick Jones is just kind of like tears, right? The line I gave you was, let's see the tears. Should I be doing the talking here, Toxin? And Toxin's like, no, Pat, I can do this. And Rick's just like, my name's not Pat, bro. It's Rick. Rick Jones. Also, don't use my name. It's amazing, dude. I love this comic. It's absolutely phenomenal. And so Rick is just like, are you sure that you're okay? Right? And Toxin's like, I can do this. Just like I said, I can be the good guy. I'm perfectly okay. Because historically speaking, Toxin was kind of a villain. And depending on who you talk to, some people would say that Toxin was actually the best of all the symbiotes that existed out there. He was the coolest symbiote, which makes sense. A hybrid Venom Carnage symbiote. Yeah, Toxin was dope. Like he was badass. But the fact is, right, Blue Streak's like, so who are you supposed to be? And with Venom watching all of this, he's like, is that Toxin with Rick Jones inside? And Venom's just like, it is, right? And they're out playing superhero in public. I think we set a bad example. And so S.C.A.R's just like, okay, major symbiote presence detected, right? And Doc Ock is like, of course, there it is. It's right there wearing Buccaneer boots. Suit up, my loyal peons, and let's show these miscreants what the all-new S.C.A.R can do. Because now, S.C.A.R stands for Simulated Cephalopod Armed Response, which is clearly a ridiculous name, but they do look awesome because they all have Dr. Octopus tentacles now. He created an army modeled after himself. And so in the midst of all that, Toxin's just kind of like, yeah, well, you took on more than even 24 arms can handle, Doc Ock. When you took on, Captain Spider, the newest, goodiest, true bluiest hero to take on the mantle, and just, he immediately gets attacked. In the middle of his monologue, he just gets punched in the face. And Blue Streak is just like, I am not a part of this. I don't know this guy. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So Venom's just like, okay, so this is getting very crazy very fast. And MJ's like, agreed, right? House meeting in the Mindscape. Do not bother to decorate. And so at that point, the two of them kind of exchange notes, right? right? And they literally have kind of a true conversation, a real conversation about what's going on here. And so MJ says, like, we don't have time for the chains and the big cube. And so Venom's just like, okay, like, whatever we do, we cannot hide from them much longer. And we can't leave Toxin or Rick. But if we do step in, it's not just us against Dr. Octopus, it's us against the whole city that hates symbiotes. And so at that point, MJ's just like, so then let's not be a symbiote. Right? Like, Dylan had the right idea, and so did Rick. Don't look like symbiotes, just look like regular good guys, which makes sense. Superheroes pop up in the city of New York all the time, like every day of the week. Sometimes they pop up for a moment and disappear just as fast because nobody cares about them, or maybe they were just as useless as tits on a boar hog. Sometimes they last a pretty chunky period of time. And so MJ's just like, meanwhile, Otto just put tentacles on his armed goon squad. They do not look like good guys. So what should we look like here, right? Who's the goodest guy we know? Who has this always been about? And maybe it's time that we admitted it. And maybe it's time that we let everyone see it. So at that point, you switch over to Dr. Octopus, who's clearly subduing Rick Jones as Toxin because Rick Jones doesn't know what he's doing, and Toxin's a little out of his element trying to be a good guy as opposed to just doing villainous stuff and killing everything in sight. And so Doc Ock is like, very interesting, Captain Spider, very unchallenging, but very interesting. Right? Your fighting style is derived from Captain America, enough that I could guess who was under that mask if that did not break a personal taboo of mine, because Dr. Octopus knows that Rick Jones is Toxin. In fact, Dr. Octopus subdued Toxin in like issue number 8 going into issue number 9. But he says, let's kill you and just be done with all of it. But then Venom pops up and says, let go of that man. And Dr. Octopus is like, who? Right? Like, who in the heck is that? And Venom's just like, who am I? Like, you sure you want to know? Because if somebody said it was a happy story, somebody lied. And so Venom's just like, who am I? And he's like, I'm Spider-Man. And I gotta be honest, man, he looks amazing. This suit looks so dope. I hope we get it in like the new Spider-Man PlayStation game that's supposed to be coming out, right? Like Spider-Man 3 or whatever it is. We really need this suit as a skin. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you had as much fun with it as I did. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button, and I will catch you all later. Peace.